Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! So I never thought my frequent visits to the local dollar store would lead to an encounter that would make me question humanity itself. One day, as I went about my usual routine of browsing the store for odds and ends, accompanied by my beloved dog Stella, things took an unexpected turn. Stella is not your typical service dog. In fact, she's far from it. She's a sweet but rather unintelligent black pointer mix who's full of quirks. She has a fondness for car rides but despises actually being in them, and she enjoys accompanying me into stores even though she's incredibly shy. Stella never underwent formal training, but she's exceptionally well behaved when shopping, except for her tendency to pull on a leash and snap at other dogs. Hence, she wears a harness, and I avoid taking her into pet stores. Everyone at the dollar store knows Stella. She's a regular just like me. She adores picking out cheap toys, especially those with squeakers that she can promptly destroy. And a friendly cashier whom I affectionately call Nancy, although that's not her real name, always has a stash of dog treats behind her register just for Stella. And of course, Stella receives a constant stream of affection and butt scratches from fellow customers. She's become a beloved fixture at the store. One particular day, as Stella and I entered the dollar store for our usual shopping adventure, I had no inkling of the bizarre and infuriating incident that lay ahead. I was in the midst of selecting my assortment of unnecessary items. I can spend ages choosing a cheap candle when nature called. I had consumed too much coffee that morning, and there was no escaping the urgency of needing a restroom break. The only problem was Stella's peculiar aversion to public restrooms, specifically the sound of flushing toilets. I wasn't about to leave my stuff unattended, and bringing it into the bathroom wasn't an option. So I approached Nancy and explained my predicament. With a warm smile, she kindly agreed to watch over Stella for me while I rushed to the restroom. After successfully completing my mission, I returned to the store feeling relieved. However, the scene that awaited me was far from pleasant. A man stood at the cash register engaged in a heated argument with Nancy. I approached trying to make sense of the situation and strained to hear their conversation. The man, who I would later dub the entitled man, was shouting at Nancy, "Don't you get it, you old hag? I want the dog." Nancy, flustered and clearly taken aback, responded, "Sir, she isn't for sale. She doesn't even belong to the store." The entitled man, with a smirk, pulled out his wallet, revealing 2 crumbled dollar bills. "Then you can sell her to me. Here." He thrust the money toward me, and I instinctively tightened my grip on Stella's leash. I responded, "I am not selling my dog, and even if I were, it wouldn't be for $2. With an eye roll, the entitled man retorted, "You're in a dollar store. $2 to cover tax. You can keep the rest. I want the dog. She'll make a good hunting dog." I couldn't believe the audacity of this man. My blood boiled. But I remained firm, asserting, "No, I don't care. She's my dog and she's not for sale. And she doesn't belong to the dollar store." Growing angrier, the entitled man sneered, "Then just give her to me. You don't need a service dog. Just look at you." Stella, sensing the tension, had begun to cower behind my leg, trembling with fear. I had to get her out of there, but I couldn't leave my purchased items unattended. Stella wasn't a small dog, and carrying her in my shopping would be a challenge. I refused to leave her alone to endure this traumatic situation just to make 2 trips to the car. "No," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "She's not a service dog. She's not a hunting dog, and she won't be your dog. She is mine, and you're scaring her. Now leave us alone." At that moment, the entitled man's aggression escalated to a horrifying level. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, attempting to wrench Stella's leash from my hand. I had the leash looped securely around my wrist, so he couldn't pull it away easily, but his pulling and his grip were excruciatingly painful. "Stop it! Leave me alone!" I cried out, desperately trying to free my hand from his grasp. The entitled man persisted. "Give me the dog, you little witch. You don't need her. I will call the police and tell them you stole her." It was chaos. People around us started yelling, Stella was whimpering, and I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. I always cried when I was deeply angered. In a desperate attempt to defend myself and Stella, I began to strike his hand with my fist, though I wasn't specifically strong. It was then that I noticed a terrifying sight. The entitled man reached into his pocket and pulled out a pocket knife, intending to cut Stella's leash. I screamed, "Knife!" to draw more attention to our dire situation. Thankfully, 3 store employees intervened, managing to pull the entitled man away from me. As he was forcefully pulled back, the knife sliced through Stella's leash, releasing her. Due to the sudden force, I tumbled backward, landing on my rear, while Stella scurried onto my lap, still trembling with fear. The entitled man, infuriated and now leashless, growled and lunged to grab Stella around her neck. She yelped in pain and fear, instinctively biting him hard. He yelled in agony and struck her nose. I swatted his hand away and clutched Stella protectively, tears streaming down my face. The situation was rapidly getting out of control, and the dollar store employees wasted no time. They used zip ties as makeshift handcuffs to restrain the entitled man temporarily and confiscated his knife. Meanwhile, someone called the police. Nancy, ever the compassionate presence, allowed me to take refuge behind the cash register with Stella as we attempted to calm down. It was clear that no one trusted the entitled man, and he was watched closely until the police arrived. Regaining my composure, I carefully examined Stella for my injuries, but she seemed physically unharmed, though deeply shaking. When the police finally arrived, the entitled man assumed an air of false confidence, spinning a wild tale about how Stella had been waiting patiently for him to finish shopping, and Nancy had told him to pay for the dog if he wanted her back because he had decided to give Stella to me instead, claiming that I was her daughter. Thankfully, the regular patrons and employees who frequented the store knew the truth. Between the eyewitness accounts and the store security camera footage, the entitled man's lies unraveled quickly. He was promptly handcuffed and led away to the police car. Hey guys, so for some background, I lost my left leg from the knee down in a jungle mishap, and I've been using a bionic leg ever since. A few years back, my doctor told me that when I'm traveling, especially by plane, I should let the TSA agents know about my prosthetic leg. They even gave me a little card that looked like a miniature X-ray to show them. I was at the airport standing in line waiting to go through security. You know the drill. Take off your shoes, belt, and empty your pockets into those plastic bins. Well, I was doing just that when I finally got to the table where the plastic bins were. I decided to do as my doctor advised and let the TSA agent know about my prosthetic leg. What could go wrong, right? I looked at the TSA lady behind the table and said, "Excuse me, I have a prosthetic leg." Now, instead of a friendly acknowledgement or a thank you for letting me know, she decided to get a bit snarky with me. She said, "Just put it in a pen and keep moving." Her tone was far from pleasant, and her demeanor made it clear she thought I was just another traveler causing a delay. Well, you see, I'm not one to back down, especially when someone's being rude for no reason. I decided to teach Miss Smug TSA lady a lesson she wouldn't forget. So I hopped up on the table while she was busy facing the other way, putting more bins up for the next person in line. I began the process of removing my prosthetic leg, making it look like a far more complex operation than it actually is. After all, I've been taking it off and putting it on for years, so I've become quite adept at it. To my amusement and that of everyone else in line behind me, as well as a TSA guy on the other side of the walk-through scanner, Miss Smudge didn't even notice what I was doing. I made sure to make a show out of it, just to drive the point home. I could see people in line behind me chuckling, and the TSA guy had a big grin on his face as he watched the scene unfold. Finally, I dropped my prosthetic leg into the bin with a satisfying thud. At this point, Miss Smug TSA lady had finally turned around and a look of realization on her face was priceless. She must have finally understood what I meant when I said I had a prosthetic leg. But you know what they say, too little, too late. With a smirk on my face, I began hopping on one leg, making my way towards the walk-through scanner. I could hear the laughter and snickers from the people in line behind me, and even the TSA guy couldn't contain his amusement. He waited patiently for me to hop through the scanner, his smile getting wider by the second. I could hear a couple of people in line muttering things like, "I guess you'll pay more attention now." You know, this wasn't about embarrassing the lady, but rather about teaching her a lesson in empathy and courtesy. It is essential to treat everyone with respect, especially when they are going through a challenging situation like traveling with a prosthetic limb. Once I made it through the scanner, I turned around and saw that quite a few people were giving me impressed looks, including the TSA guy who had been all smiles. It was a small victory, but it felt good to know that I had made a point. Just act polite towards others, even when you're just doing your job. Life went on and I didn't hold any grudges against Miss Smug TSA lady. I just like to think that sometimes a little unconventional action can lead to positive change, even if it involves hopping through a security scanner with one leg. I've been married to my wife for quite some time now. Before we tied the knot, I had managed to amass a substantial amount of wealth. Knowing that marriage can be tricky when it comes to finances, we decided to have a prenuptial agreement. This agreement spelled out that our assets would remain separate, just like they were before we said our I do's. It's important to mention that my wife also brought significant wealth into the marriage. We had always been clear about our financial independence and respected each other's financial boundaries. Now, let's fast forward to 2 months ago. My wife and I had been discussing the idea of moving to a smaller town and getting a beachside property for some time. 2 months ago, we finally took the plunge and bought a lovely house near the beach. We were both excited about the new adventure ahead. We didn't waste any time in making renovations, buying furniture, and preparing for the move. It felt like a fresh start and we were looking forward to the change. But there was one thing I hadn't told her yet, and it turned out to be a big mistake. You see, besides the house we currently lived in, I still owned a beautiful apartment in the same city. Usually I rented it out, but at the moment, it was vacant. Given that we were going to move away from the city, I didn't see any reason to keep the house we were living in. So I made the decision to sell it. I didn't inform my wife beforehand. To me, it seemed like a logical decision. After all, it was my property and we had a perfectly good apartment in the same city that we could use whenever we needed to be there. Plus, buying and selling property can be a hassle, and I thought I was sparing her the stress. On the day I finalized the sale, I finally broke the news to her, and that's when things took a turn for the worse. She was furious with me for not letting her know about the sale in advance. She argued that I hadn't treated her like I should by making such an important decision without involving her. I tried to explain my reasoning, telling her that we still had the apartment and that she could use it whenever she needed to be in a city, but she was having none of it. She was upset and felt blindsided by my decision. She argued that it was a completely different situation because it was a house we had been living in and we were moving in just a few days. Now I'm caught in a dilemma. I genuinely believed that I was doing what made the most sense financially and logistically. I didn't see it as leaving her without an address in the city because we had the apartment, but she feels hurt and betrayed, and she's not backing down from her position. So here I am, wondering if I'm the jerk in this situation. And now some comments on a post. Well, you are the jerk. Sounds like this house was your main residence. It seems reasonable to me that you would have discussed what would happen to it after your move. That would have been the time to make the case that the apartment you also own could serve as her residence when she's in town. It does seem that you didn't care what she thought about selling the place. You should have involved her, even if you think it is your asset. Another commenter says, You are the jerk. This isn't a money thing, or even a house thing. It's a communication thing. She's lived in that house for years. She has memories, associations, and probably had plans for the future involved in it. Just snatching that away from her is a jerk move. A third commenter goes with, "You're the jerk. Cool, it's your money, but is she your partner or what? If you can't talk through life decisions with your life partner and treat her like an equal, why did you get married? I couldn't imagine doing something like that to my boyfriend. Not to mention, she was living there and it's a big deal to have your house sold out from under you, whether you own it or not. Ultimately, this is not about the money, but about your wife feeling like an accessory." Let me take you back to a time when my friends and I were just kids, living in an HDB and enjoying the simple pleasures of childhood. Our playground was our kingdom and soccer was our game of choice. There were plenty of us, but we always tried to keep the noise down. We were considerate, we thought, but that didn't stop an entitled Karen from crashing into our world. It was a regular evening when my helper took my little brother and me downstairs to play with the other kids. Soccer had been our main gig, but this time we decided to switch things up a bit. Nerf guns were the new stars of the show. We were having a blast, laughing and joking, firing foam darts at each other with abandon. Little did we know that our peaceful evening was about to be disrupted. That's when she arrived, the so-called beast of the story. Karen, we later named her. She stormed over to us with a look of pure annoyance on her face. "What are you people doing? Don't you have any respect for the rest of the neighbors? We all want to sleep, and you're keeping me awake." I couldn't help but look at my watch. It was 6 in the evening, and she was dressed to the nines, looking completely awake and ready for a night on the town. We exchanged knowing looks and stifled giggles. "Hey, don't mock me. I'm older than you. I will call the police and get you all arrested for making too much noise." Our stifled giggles turned into full-blown laughter. We knew she couldn't do that. It was still before 8 p.m. and making noise at this hour wasn't against any rules. Karen had a knack for making it seem like we were in big trouble. My helper, along with some of her friends, stepped in to defend us. He says, "We haven't done anything wrong. In fact, we've recorded the whole thing because we like recording kids having fun with their friends. Maybe you should relax a bit." Karen continued to rant and rave, but one of my friends had had enough. He tells her, "Why don't you just go away and leave us alone?" Surprisingly, Karen huffed and stormed off, pointing a finger at us as she left. We thought that was the end of it, shrugged off the encounter, and went on with our play. A few weeks later, we were back at the playground enjoying a spirited game of soccer. Most of us were there, and the cheers and shouts of excitement echoed through the air. The neighbors didn't seem to mind. After all, it was still daytime and well within acceptable noise levels. But then, our opponent arrived. Karen. She descended upon us like a storm, shouting at the top of her lungs, "Give me the ball now, or you will get hurt." We were taken aback by her aggressive tone. We were just kids playing soccer, having a good time. Panic set in as we tossed the ball between us, running in different directions to evade her. My friend with the ball made a split-second decision to run down the nearby ramp, which was faster than the stairs Karen was attempting to navigate. As for me, I opted for the rocky path. I scrambled up the side of the staircase using the rocks for leverage and made my escape. We reconvened at my place, which was conveniently nearby. Panting and relieved, we realized that we had narrowly escaped what seemed like a scene from a horror movie. One of my friends who had the foresight to look back reported seeing Karen brandishing a kitchen knife. She had apparently intended to puncture our soccer ball. We breathed a collective sigh of relief, grateful for our narrow escape from what felt like a potential disaster. After that day, we didn't see Karen around anymore. It seemed like she had given up on trying to catch us. We were just too fast and agile for her. We were a bunch of energetic, nimble children, and she was the epitome of an entitled Karen. Overweight, out of shape, and unable to navigate the simple staircase without nearly falling off. I am sharing this story with you 6 years after it all happened. Some of the words Karen used and the exact details may have faded from my memory, but the essence of the story remains.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.